All right, guys, in this episode, we're talking about the power of feedback. As a creative, a huge chunk of what we do is really feedback based, because there are not two persons who are the same. And as a creative, we tend to see things the way we are, not necessarily the way they are. And because you're a different person from your clients and those that you're servicing, your opinions and your interpretation and expression of things will always be different. And that's why it's very, very important that as a creative, you don't take feedback personal. A feedback is not an establishment of your own incompetence most of the time. It's not saying you're not good at what you do. It's not saying that you don't have the skills. What feedback is saying most of the time is that, what you've delivered to me right now does not match my visual expectation. And which is okay, because truly no two persons are the same. And because we are not the same, there is a large possibility that we will not like the same thing. It could go with colors, it could go with brands. For instance, I like dark colors. I'm naturally drawn to dark colors because of my personality and my temperament. That other people who are drawn to bright colors doesn't make them any better than you, and the other way around. It's just that we are different people and we see things differently. And so as a creative person, you also must have the soundness of mind to be able to filter feedback and take them constructively without any personal emotional attachment, because again, it's just somebody's opinion and doesn't necessarily mean that it's fact. Because if you send this content to 100 people, there'll be maybe half of them will like it, half of them will have an opinion, and it's just what it is. It's not that personal. It just shows that we are all different, and because we are different, our perspective and our interpretation and expression of things will be different. But as a creative person, how do you take it? How do you understand feedback? How do you sort of interpret feedback without getting emotional? The first thing first is to understand that, again, like I said, it's not personal. It's project based. It's not a reflection of your own skills. It does not mean that you are incompetent, you don't have the skill, or you're an imposter. What you do, it just means on this project, I just haven't nailed it as you expected. And that's where a brief comes in. That's why it's very important to have brief on every project. Let it be written, let it be interpreted, let us have clarity, and let us have agreement. You see, those are the phases: a brief, interpretation, clarity, clarification, as you will call it, and an agreement. We both must agree on every line on the project to say, okay, this is what's going to be happening at this point. This is what I'm going to be doing. This is what I think I would do. Does that make sense to you? We agree before going to the project. Now, having an agreement is important so that we are both aligned, when it comes to the interpretation of the project, so that when we're delivered on the outcome, nobody's disappointed. Now, sometimes not every client will give you feedback. Some client may not be totally impressed with what you've done, but also don't have the energy and the time to go back and forth with you, or they may have had something that you've done in the course of the project and they're not happy about, but they may not be able to communicate it to you, for whatever reason. So my suggestion to every creative, always have a feedback form. You can create form easily on Google these days. Have a feedback form that you send to your client to say, okay, we've concluded on this project. Tell me what you think on this project, right? And then let them tell you what they think. Tell me what you like. Tell me what you don't like. Tell me what you would have preferred I do better. Tell me what, why you will work with me on the next project. Tell me why you will not work with me on the next project, because those are the things that you need to know. And so you'll be able to know what to improve on, how to, better deliver on your service going forward, right? Also, getting feedback from your client can also serve as testimonials, right? So when you ask them for feedback, it might be mixed, but you want to take the positive side and amplify that on your own social media or on your website. Don't forget, we talked about building a one-page website in the last episode. If you haven't seen that, you should go and watch that. We talked about how to land your first client. So when you get this kind of feedback after you've landed your first client, you want to put those feedback as testimonials on your website, which will eventually help you land more clients. You see how everything is somehow connected. Again, it's called feedback, not a debate. So we need your opinion at this point. Just take the feedback. Okay, I've heard what you said, no problems. I would say I'm going to improve on it moving forward. If a case where you have to give clarity, all right, give clarity, but try not to be defensive, because it will just defeat the purpose of trying to get feedback from your client. Get the feedback, take your learnings, and then see how you can improve and apply those learnings moving forward, which is the most critical thing, to be honest. So it is in your best interest to get feedback, because that's the only way you know what to improve on. Because as a creative person, you're just stuck up in your own bubble and you feel like, you're doing the best work that any human being have seen, right? But when you get feedback, It points you at directions where you need to improve yourself, and ensure that these feedback are, constructive, right? You must be able to separate criticism from feedback. Criticism do not tell you how to improve. Criticism is just ego boosting for whoever has an opinion to give. Most of the time, criticism are just total waste of time. Feedback is constructive. They tell you, this is what you've done wrong. This is how I think you can improve to serve me better. That's feedback, right? This is how I think you can get better. But criticism it's the easiest form of creativity. Anybody can sit down and just have something to say. Somebody's best movie will be my worst movie. And so my worst movie can be someone's best movie, even though I don't understand why anybody would think Breaking Bad is not great, but that's your problem. Anyways, moving on. Another thing as a creative you need to pay attention to is communication. And that's even something I am still struggling with, and I'm still improving and learning, still taking short courses here and there to improve on communication, because no one gets it right all the time and no one is perfect, right? So you want to improve on your communication. You want to be sure that you are communicating using the right tonality, the right choice of words, and you're also using the right emotion and the right gestures as well, when you're communicating. You want to ensure that you are not overly emotional when you're communicating to your client. You want to give constructive, opinion, opinion backed by data if possible. Which is something I've just recently learned, that it's best to give opinion with some bit of data. Don't just say that's what everybody's doing and that's what we are saying. No, what's the data? Is everybody saying it? How is this impacting on the product or the business? Are we seeing 10% increase in the business? Are we seeing 5% drop in the business? Where are the data? Because the numbers are there to give more credibility to your opinions, right? And it's very important that as a creative that we do a bit of research. That's something that a lot of us don't do. We don't have the numbers. We don't have the data to back what we say. Why is the presenter in the middle? What is the data surrounding this creative idea? Why are we filming 1/3? What's the data? Oh, the data says when you put a person 1/3 of the camera, they see a 1% number of retention or attention from the viewers. We need to be able to start communicating more with data, with numbers, so as to give more credibility to our opinion. And that way it's harder for anybody to debate with you or to argue what you've got to say, because you have your facts. Do you understand what I mean? So as a creative, those are the things you want to put together, whilst also giving feedback to your clients. Get your data, get your facts right. Also understand that no feedback is also a feedback. You know what I mean? No feedback is also a feedback, because if a client is impressed with what you've done, they will definitely say something. They'll be like, wow, I'm happy with this work. Or wow, you surpassed my expectation. And when it does, neither here nor there, that is also a feedback that you haven't lived up to the expectation. So that means you have to do better. So, you must sort for ways to get those feedback from your clients, and also get feedback from your colleagues. What I do, which is, again, I'm very lucky to have with my mentor, is that I can send him my project and say, critique this for me. And he can tell me, oh, this picture should not be there. Oh, use this, use that. And not just my mentor, I have other colleagues and friends in my ecosystem that I also send my works to, and are able to critique it for me and give me constructive feedback, and I can take those feedback and apply them to improve. One thing you should always have at the back of your mind is that an improved version of your work is the best for you. Right? You may have done something and you think it's great, and somebody says tweak this part, tweak this, and you do those things and you see that, oh wow, now the work is better. Who gets the credit for it? You, not the person who's giving you the feedback. When people give me feedback, what I typically just do is just do a copy of the project, keep the one I think I really like, and implement those feedback that I think make sense to me. When I implement those feedback, I sit back and watch them, just oppose it with what you're already done, and see which comes out better. And if what you have advanced on is better, of course, send that forward. And don't forget, who takes the credit for it is you. Now, don't take feedback as you just want to talk me down, which is why it's very important to know who you take feedback from. Don't take feedback from people who you don't want to be like, or people who are not on the same journey as you, right? I take feedback from those that are above me, those that I look up to, and those that I know have my best interests at heart. Right? I take those feedback and I implement them where necessary. And every time, in fact, 90% of the time, I have seen my work improve just by taking constructive feedback from those that I really trust.